there is a cost and trade-off associated with getting bigger, putting on more muscle mass, and getting jacked. We're going to accelerate aging. We're going to accelerate cellular senescence, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction. So what can we do to ameliorate and reduce some of the negative effects of a hypercaloric, high carbohydrate, high calorie diet? Because you want to get bigger, right? Like, I want to get bigger, I want to get more jacked, but I also care about health span. I also care about quality of life. I also care about reducing my chance of getting diseased and cancer growth and tumor growth, things that are accelerated by constant IGF-1 pathway proliferation. And so we can look at some recent research that was just published about a week ago on using methyl donors, supplementation, to improve biomarkers and even depression and mental health in the context of a hypercaloric, high sugar diet, which we know a lot of our athletes, bodybuilders are on and aren't going to stop it because this is the mission and this is the goal that we have. And so, okay, what can we do to reduce some of these negative effects? Well, we know this is a mouse study, okay, but there is some practical application that we can use to humans. So they looked at the effects of methyl donors. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about folate, betaine, B vitamins, I say BBB, B vitamins like B12, and folate, which is another B vitamin, and choline, okay? So we can now look at these supplements. What did they find briefly? TLDR, okay? When they gave mice methyl donors who were on a high sugar diet compared to the ones who weren't or continued on the high sugar diet, they noticed methyl donors normalized depression, oxidative stress in the hippocampus. Methyl donors reverse damage observed in the hippocampal neurons. Methyl donors normalized lipid profiles like total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol and triglycerides, and normalized adipose fat gain. Methyl donors may be a potential therapeutic value in treatment of depression. So that was their practical takeaway, and I'm like, hold on. This can be used for humans. Like, this can have some practical applications, not for just treatment of mental ailments, but why not for our athletes and bodybuilders and guys and girls who are wanting to get bigger, put on muscle mass, but you need to be in a hypercaloric diet to do so. But you acknowledge that being in a hypercaloric diet for years and years on end, like many of us are, has a cost associated with it, trade-off to it. Like earlier I was talking about, we have studies that show that hypercaloric diets, and mostly actually like fat gain and body weight increase and adipose tissue increase, which comes with a hypercaloric diet and muscle mass anyway, increases these pathways like cellular senescence, mitochondrial dysfunction, like keeping blood glucose constantly elevated almost all day through these high carbohydrate or high calorically dense meals. Like, damn, it's just, I wish it didn't have such a cost, but over years and years, like, it can, particularly then you compound maybe anabolics on top of that, and you got a recipe for like, you got to be really careful about, potentially contributing to disease when you don't want to. So what are some things we can do about it? Well, we can use methyl donors. We can use these supplements, these micronutrients, choline, betaine, folate, vitamin B12, which can better facilitate methylation pathways, okay? And so methylation, how do we summarize methylation, guys? Like, I want you to think like these compounds that I mentioned, like this methylation and methyl donors could not be understated, could not be overstated, right? Let me correct that. They are so important for detoxification pathways, like glutathione. They are so important for managing your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, and managing stress and dopamine and noradrenaline and adrenaline. And so basically, it is such a critical pathway, biological pathway. If you care about optimizing the internal workings and biochemistry of your body, then we should be caring about methylation and methionine. Therefore, caring about these compounds and adding them in or being conscious of your dietary intake and increasing your dietary intake in the context of a high carbohydrate, hypercaloric diet. That is my takeaway from this. Yes, it is a mouse study. We cannot directly apply it to humans, but I think it has some ecological validity and practical application, or at least highlighting the importance of how important these nutrients are to facilitate such vital chemical reactions and enzymatic processes in the body, and DNA and RNA, gene expression. And so one nice little diagram here: methyl donors, decreasing triglycerides, decreasing body gain, depression, hippocampal neurons. Cool. Where can you find these things? Egg yolks, soy foods, talking choline, whole grains are high in betaine, vegetables high in folate, meat, dairy, fortified wheat products, B12. You want to get all that checked and get your blood markers checked, and hopefully you're not just relying on serum B12, because you want to look at something like methylcobalamin, active B12, to assess B12 intake. Unfortunately, serum B12 is a very unsensitive marker, and it's a very late stage B12 of deficiency marker. So don't wait till that's low, otherwise you're really deficient. So methyl groups may have also antioxidant properties that defend the body from oxidative damage due to environmental stress, such as a high sugar diet, such as emotional stress, such as gastrointestinal stress from things like IBS potentially. So, and that's really important because now we can use these to ameliorate the detrimental effects of that high sugar diet that we know or high carbohydrate diet that we're going to be on, or a lot of people are going to be on. But what were the actual findings? Well, here's what we saw. Female rats, they were given a standard chow diet, 23% fructose added, which is twice the sugar concentration of most sodas. After 10 weeks, they gave half the rats in the fructose group. They split the group in half. They gave half of them a methyl donor supplements, and they gave the other half nothing. They just continued on. And what did they find? Because this is now having application to people. Because there's people who are not taking these supplements and they're deficient in these nutrients, and then there are people who are not. I would hypothesize quite confidently, until we see human trials, that those people are likely to be much more protected against oxidative stress, cellular senescence, and all the aging pathways that accelerate DNA damage and aging. Because what if you could have your cake and eat it too? What if you could have the high sugar hypercaloric diet and you didn't have to die when you're 67 from tumor growth? Of course, exercise is definitely going to ameliorate, and lean body mass is definitely going to ameliorate a lot of these disease risks. But I'd still like to cap the odds in my favor if we can. Why not? So, after 8 weeks of methyl donor supplementation, the hippocampal damage reversed. Depression, anxiety behavior reduced. Methyl donor supplementation normalized glucose, triglyceride, and cholesterol levels among rats who were still consuming the high fructose diet. That's very interesting to me, okay? And here we have a nice little graph that demonstrates this. In the purple, you have the control group. In the red, F for fructose group. In the green, you have the introduction of the methyl donors at the 10-week mark. And what we know, and this is what we're looking at, is body weight. Their final body weight and their trajectory over the weeks. I believe this is in grams. And what they saw is once they gave this rat group, or this, they're rats, mice, same, not really. Rats, once they gave the rats the methyl donors, they plateaued. They did not continue to meaningfully increase like the fructose group. We looked at adiposity. That is C adipose tissue weight gain per body weight expressed in grams. You see the fructose and methyl donor group significantly less. And all statistically significant, well below 0.05, which is great. So wow, Same caloric intake, but now we're just adding methyl donors. Now, I don't know, because I'm not familiar with rats and how the statistical actual difference between, is this a meaningful difference? Is the difference between 150-ish grams and upwards of 300 grams, a meaningful, significant difference, practically speaking. Okay, I want to acknowledge I don't know for sure. In some just basic, quick looking up, I think it is like rats can weigh up to 300 grams, and these rats were obviously getting overweight and obese, it appeared. So the difference, like that's a 50% difference, 150 gram difference. That appears like a significant difference, but I'm willing to concede that I could be wrong. And if anybody knows, put your comment down below and let me know. Otherwise, like, okay, could we slow down adiposity or reduce adiposity with methyl donors in a hypercaloric, high sugar diet? Interesting. Maybe. I'd like to put my chances towards that. Why not just plug in nutrient deficiencies if we can? Actually, they found folic acid, this is another study, was found to reduce visceral obesity and to improve insulin resistance through an increase in plasma adiponectin levels in high-fat fed rats. Thus, one may suggest that methyl donors combined together exert their antidepressant effect through their antioxidant properties as reflected by the normalization in nitrate content and MDA levels, leading to the protection against neurons damage at the hippocampus tissue level in chronically high fructose fed rats. So we're talking about how folic acid could, or the mechanism of how folic acid could have a protective or reduced capability or to reduce visceral adiposity, which is awesome if we can do that. So visceral fat. So we might not get reductions in adipose and in subcutaneous fat, but what's one of the most strong body weight morphological characteristics of all-cause mortality? It's visceral fats. It's less so subcutaneous. It's more the fat around your organs. So if we can move that needle in the right direction with some folic acid supplementation, awesome. Biochemical pathways. This was interesting to me because what can get thrown out of whack when you're in a hypercaloric high sugar diet is your total cholesterol, is your LDL, is your triglycerides even. So this is pretty important marker because then this is going to be a correlate to a whole bunch of other diseases that you could ameliorate. So I'm thinking, well, why not use supplementation then, methyl donors then to manage lipid pathologies. High fructose feedings increase significantly the plasma glucose levels in comparison to control rats. Duh, obviously. The 8-week treatment with methyl donors significantly reduced the rise in plasma glucose levels in fructose-fed rats. This is very interesting because obviously a high sugar, high fructose diet is going to represent with a high plasma glucose levels. And that's then going to accelerate all these pathways that we talked about with aging. What then if we could then ameliorate that, significantly reduce that? That's big, okay? Depression-like behavior, high fructose feedings increase significantly the time of immobility in comparison to control rats. This was during a forced swim test. The 8 weeks treatment with methyl donors reversed this decrease in time of immobility. So they force them to swim, and then when they can't swim anymore, they measure in time. The methyl donor fed group, noticed they were immobile significantly less, similar to the control group compared to the fructose high sugar group. So this is like a proxy for depressive behavior that they found is useful to test in rats. Again, all statistically significant. Mechanism. I think it's a mechanism. Vitamin B12 and folate were found to be markedly lower in patients suffering from major depressive disorder, while supplementation of B12 was found to improve significantly the depressive symptoms. So we're just talking about some other citations of how B12 can facilitate management of depression. Lastly, oxidative stress parameters, really important, I think pretty important markers. 8-week treatment with methyl donors reversed the rise in nitrite content in fructose-fed rats to values which did not differ from controls. Fructose-fed rats exhibited a statistically significant increase in hippocampal lipid peroxidation levels compared to control. This is basically it's a measure of oxidative damage in the cell membranes, lipoproteins, another marker for oxidative stress. So not that big a difference with nitrite content, but lipid peroxidation, more significant differences between the fructose and methyl donor group. Awesome. That's great. Betaine was found to exert protective effects against cytotoxic. So betaine can decrease these markers called MDA and protein carbonyl levels and exert a protective effect. So the practical relevance of this for the researchers was that it could pave the way for new development strategies for depression and anxiety. We do need to see this study in humans to get more confidence of its validity and application. For me, this to me is worthy of consideration and at least assessment, a bare minimum assessment of biochemical markers. You know, if someone is exercising frequently, a high stress, consistent physical activity, weight training, consistent aerobic activity, you're training every day for, a couple hours a day, that necessitates more nutrients based on the higher burden that you are putting on certain biochemical pathways like methylation, homocysteine pathways. And so then necessitating the use of methyl donors not only to plug in nutrient deficiencies, but to facilitate and ameliorate some of the decrements to a hypercaloric, high sugar diet, or even for our overweight and obese, high BMI people, looking at supplementation as an adjunctive therapy to diet, sleep habits, nutrition, all of that stuff. Data show that methyl donors reduce the increase in plasma glucose levels, triglycerides, total cholesterol, reversed visceral adiposity, depression-like behavior in chronically fructose-fed female rats. It is my contention that we can then use this extrapolation to apply it to bodybuilders, athletes, and anybody who is looking to put on a considerable amount of muscle mass and be in a hypercaloric diet for a considerable amount of time. For those who care about health span and quality of life, may consider assessing nutrient deficiencies, B12, dietary intake, and then looking at methyl donor supplementation to potentially reduce the decrements and increases in disease risk through using methyl donors supplementation. I hope that was valuable. It's a little more heady. Leave your comments below, guys, what you think, if you found that valuable, and what you think, and if there was anything I didn't see, any errors I made that you could pick up and say, hey, you missed this, or just your general thoughts on, I don't know, do any of you guys supplement with methyl donors already? Have you noticed anything from your blood work? Put them down below. I'm Alexander, Strength of Saad. See you guys in the next one.